Are you new to making beats and thinking of purchasing the Maschine Studio as your first piece of production equipment? Or maybe right now you're using the Maschine MK2 or the Maschine Micro and you're thinking about upgrading to the Maschine Studio platform. Or maybe you're coming from a DAW environment or another piece of production equipment like an MPC and you're thinking of switching on over to the Maschine platform and you want to know whether or not this thing is right for you. Well, today's video is just for you. It's going to be the ultimate resource about Maschine Studio and why it's right for some people and maybe not so right for others. So today's video is going to be an in-depth review talking about the majority of the great features of the Maschine Studio and why, like I said, it's right for some and maybe not as great for others. So watch this review today and you'll find out exactly the information that you need to know in order to make a decision about whether or not you should grab one. So let's first talk about the hardware. Visually speaking, just looking at this thing, Maschine Studio is the sexiest piece of equipment that I have seen. Ableton Push is also a good looking piece of equipment, but in my opinion, nothing can really compete with this. Just compared to everything else out there, it's so intuitive to create with, and when you're using it, it just feels like time is flying because Maschine Studio is so fun and simple to work with. So if you come from the Maschine MK1 or the MK2, you're going to immediately be familiar with all of the controls and the interface of the Maschine Studio. The control knobs are pretty much the same as where they were before, minus a new section of buttons and knobs, which are this master control volume section on the top right and this jog wheel on the bottom right. But we'll talk about this a little bit later. The Maschine Studio 2.0 software and the hardware are designed perfectly to complement each other. So one of the major benefits of the Studio is being able to pretty much do everything directly on the hardware screen itself. Now you're not really capable of doing this on the MK2. So visually on these LCD screens, it makes it very easy for you to navigate around and do everything that you would previously have to do on the software. Okay, so because you can do things like arranging and throwing in your samples and doing sound design and different functions like that, I find myself doing everything on the hardware right now. It makes it easy to go with the flow of things. I find myself touching my mouse a lot less because I'm able to focus completely on the hardware. It makes it easier to focus on how my music is sounding instead of getting caught up in the distractions of clicking my mouse and all that. Another important improvement of the Maschine Studio and the 2.0 software is the dedicated mixing control section. Now this mixing control section gives you one location to visually see and control everything that's going on inside of your mix. So you can set your volume faders, adjust stereo panning, you can see your effects, all from one simple location. And it sounds like it's something simple, but these are things that you weren't able to do on the 1.8 software. Let's talk about the addictive qualities of the Maschine Studio. It's hard to articulate, but the addictiveness, I mean that it's incredibly fun and easy to use. Like these shiny lights, these pretty screens. It's really cool to touch and feel. And that's not something you can really quantify, but the hands-on factor really makes it really a lot of fun to work with this thing for extended periods of time. It's like playing some sort of really super cool, complicated video game. Hours are going to pass without you realizing it. And it's going to be a good thing. And once you understand how it works, it's really easy to make this thing get out of your way so that you can just make music. So another thing that is a cool addition to the Maschine Studio hardware are these dedicated controls. So at the bottom left, you can kind of see a dedicated metronome button, which is new to Maschine Studio. This allows you to turn on and off the metronome by pressing simple buttons, which is really cool. They got a dedicated undo and redo buttons in the edit control section, which allows you to do functions like undo and redo patterns quickly. They have a precise pattern editor using this jog wheel on the bottom right that you see. And using the jog wheel, you can really get your MIDI pattern timing down tight by making subtle shifts on the notes in one direction or the other. So a lot of the dedicated buttons make it a lot more simple to use and create using the Maschine Studio. Now that we talked a little bit about what I like about the Maschine Studio, let's talk about what I don't like. So there are definitely a lot of positives about this, but it wouldn't be a real review if I didn't point out the negatives of this as well. And there certainly are a few. So the power cord, I'm sure you've heard about this complaint, or maybe not, but In order to use this beautiful LCD screen, I guess it's a design function, an engineering function, the Maschine Studio requires a power cord that has to be plugged into a wall. So instead of just having a USB cord plug into your computer, like on the MK2, Maschine Studio requires that you be plugged the USB into the computer as well as a power cable that plugs into the wall to power up these LCD screens. So the fact that you have to plug up this thing to the wall is pretty annoying, but there's not really a way around it. So who should buy this thing? That's what you want to hear. Let's get down to it. You want to know if you should purchase the Maschine Studio. And my answer is dependent on where you're trying to go with your music. If you're trying to make electronic music, hip-hop music, this thing is the shit, okay? If you want to sample from vinyl or waves or whatever, in my opinion, there's no better tool for sample-based beats than the Maschine platform, period. It's tactile, it's fun, it's simple, it's easy to use, and it's incredibly powerful. So the combination of this software and this hardware can't be touched if you want to make sample-based beats or really any sort of electronic rhythm-based beats, because this thing is all about making grooves. Maschine Studio is for you if Maschine is going to be the centerpiece of your creation process. And by that I mean, if you use most of your time creating, which is like building drum loops, chopping samples, arranging and mixing inside a Maschine already. So for example, you're not using a DAW like Ableton or whatever else, Logic. The Maschine Studio is going to be super valuable for you if you upgrade to Maschine Studio. So if you're already working in Maschine, then this thing would be very valuable for you because it's going to make it a lot more fun and a lot more easy for you to create. And on top of that, you'll already have experience working within the Maschine environment, so you'll know how this thing works, and it'll be easy for you to get up and running with it. Also, if you're a beginner to making beats, spending $1,000 on a new hobby might not sound like the best idea. But if you consider this, if you purchase Ableton Live 9 and an MPD or something, or Logic, the new Logic in an MPD or another sort of controller, that combination together is going to cost you around the same as a Maschine Studio. So considering that, it might be worth it to purchase the Maschine Studio. If not the Studio, then the MK2. If you've got it like that, if you've got $1,000 to spend, I know some of you like to spend that much money on your hobby, it should be a really cool tool to learn on. But I recognize that this thing isn't for everyone, so let's talk about who should not purchase the Maschine Studio. The Maschine Studio is not for you if you do most of your work in some other DAW or software environment. So for example, if you have most of your experience working with Ableton or Pro Tools or Logic, or you plan on using the Maschine basically as a plug-in controller, MIDI controller, don't buy Maschine Studio because you're only going to be using a fraction of its functionality, okay? You'll be better off buying a Maschine Micro or an MK1 or something for like $300 and just using those MIDI pads. Don't buy a Maschine Studio if your main tool of or your main work environment is something else, because you're only going to be using a little bit of it. So, if you're new to making beats, or maybe you've been making beats for a while and are just really frustrated with the progress that you're making on your Maschine, go ahead and grab my Maschine ebook. This thing is packed with the secrets that have taken most producers years to learn on their own. So, producing secrets, we're talking about how to mix tracks within Maschine, the proper way to sample within Maschine, how to e-dig properly to find free samples and sounds for your Maschine. This thing is really great, especially if you're considering purchasing a Maschine Studio, or if you're already in the Maschine environment. This ebook is 100% free, and it's chock full with 60 pages of information, 60 pages of secrets that most Maschine producers, they don't learn within the course of their beat making, just because these things are really kind of tucked away. So go ahead and grab your copy. After I'm finished talking, there will be an email box that appears pretty much above my face, and you can go ahead and enter in your email address right on my face here, I guess, and get your free copy of the Maschine ebook. So what's going to happen once you enter in your email address and press get my ebook, I will send a confirmation email to make sure that it is correct email address that you've given me, to make sure there's no discrepancies there. You'll confirm that it is the right email address, and automatically I will send out to you an email attachment with the Maschine ebook download in it. And you can go ahead and break it open and really get started improving your beats super quickly. Like I said, there's nothing like this out there, period. Okay? let alone something for free. So before I start charging for this, go ahead and grab it. Like I said, after I'm stopped talking, this box is going to come up and you can go ahead and grab it. Also, there's a link below in this blog article, and you can go ahead and check that out in the show notes.